Taranaki, foremost amongst them.
Jacinda Ardern.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my pleasure to be able to take a call.
Seniority.
Thank you. I think that was Trevor Mallard's attempt before to give me props, maybe, or perhaps rescue. I don't know that anyone really has ever.
All right, you've got to sit down. He's standing up. You can't tell, I know.
No, it was just that Mr. Little had been here a long time, and I desperately knew he needed a call, so that's why I took him before you.
Mr. Chair, as one who well understands the frustration of the continual attempt to take a call, I really applaud the democratic way in which these calls have been awarded. I feel that there's no favour expressed, and I'm not still reeling from my massive defeat in the Waikato at your hand, Mr. Chair, and I know that you've been giving me sympathy calls ever since. Mr. Chair, I think it's important when we debate title and commencement clauses that we take them in context. And we are debating whether or not the customs and excise budget measures and motor spirits amendment bill should remain as such. Now, I agree with the Deputy Leader that to a certain extent the use of the word budget measures does give an indication as to what this bill is attempting to achieve. So I want to acknowledge that up front there is a little bit of transparency in this title. By using the reference to budget measures, it is very clear that this is one of the government's primary ways of getting this country back into surplus. Now, I think that was pointed out by our leader in his budget speech, that people should remember when they're at the petrol pump what has gotten this government over the line when it comes to their much-trumpeted surplus in the future budget. So I think we need to take that all with a grain of salt and with a bit of context, that that's what it's taken to get us over the line. So in that regard, the title has reflected something that I think is accurate. But in many ways, actually, other elements of the bill have tried to ignore that. You only need to look at the regulatory impact statement to get a hint of what the rest of the bill then claims that it's trying to do. I do want to add that I'm pleased, though we have in this case a regulatory impact statement, although I would have liked to have seen a little bit more detail in that. But it says, and this is a good place to look, Mr. Chair, for some other ideas for what this bill perhaps should have been called in its title. It states in the regulatory impacts assessment that forecasts of revenue and expenditure for the National Land Transport Fund in November 2012 indicated a total revenue shortfall of around $1.6 billion over the next few years. That indicates, obviously, things are going terribly wrong in the way the government's prioritising its spend within the National Land Transport Fund. Or simply ignoring that people are choosing to travel and transport themselves differently, not least because of the rising cost of living and of transport generally. So you could, in that sense, call this the spending more than we have on poorly planned projects bill. Or you could, in that sense, call it the plugging the gap for the road of national significance bill, because that is exactly what this bill does. And in that sense, it is also, as I said before, Mr. Speaker, very important that we look at a bill in its totality before we vote for it. Now, we have in the past, of course, used things like regional fuel taxes to make sure that we cover our transport needs for a region, Auckland being amongst those high on the list when we think about the needs for those kinds of measures. But for Labour, that has always been about trying to cover the costs of all transport options, not simply saying that the land transport, that pot of money needs to simply go to building more and more highways, because that's not future-proofing our transport needs. But this bill is very explicitly about trying to plug a gap for building those roads of national significance. So whilst we, of course, in the past have used those measures, we've always been clear that they're for a range of projects, and I would highlight that for the Greens. Why would they want to vote for a bill that is so explicitly going to end up going into projects that I know they don't support? And that's something that I think contextually we must be very clear about when we vote for measures like this. It's not just about the measure, but it's about where it ends up. And so that's why I'd almost, again, as I say, Mr. Speaker, call it the excise and customs and excise bill for the roads of national significance, just to be very clear about what will be happening with this extra revenue. But also, as the title implies, this is for the budget, but it's also trying to go towards plugging that RONS gap. So you could almost call it the sell it, tax it, spend it 12 times over bill, because that's exactly what we've seen as well with the way this government has behaved with assets. As I have mentioned, Mr. Speaker, that the government did get rid of the regional fuel tax some time ago now, when they came into Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair. Ian Galloway.
Mr. Chairman, I've been looking forward to having an opportunity to speak on